council to order. It is 6:45 p.m. We do have a quorum. All right. We have Councilmember Green doing the invocation, and we have Councilmember Jones doing the pledge to the flags. We'll go ahead and review the agenda and consent agenda here in a moment. And we don't have any other workshop according to this, so okay, thank you. First up is presentation. We are being recognized by Texas Police Chiefs Association Foundation. So there'll be a presentation for item C. Item D, public hearing. Item F, consent agenda. Item 2, the minutes. Item F3, approval of interlocal agreement. Item F4. Item F5. Item G6.
You will have a presentation out and while you're on the dais.
Item G7.
You'll have another presentation out while you're out on the dais.
Can we really explain this?
It's right there.
Okay. So that the public really knows what's going on?
Are you talking about the fishing barge?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing. So the
Okay.
presentation will, and it's going to be our fire marshal, and I don't know if our building.
Oh, here.
You want to introduce our new fire
There he is.
marshal?
That's Tom Legler right there.
Hi.
Tom Legler, I'm the new fire marshal.
Hey, Tom. Welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And then our building official will also be presenting, and then also our parks director.
Okay.
All right. Item 8, consideration of appointments for the Serve Louisville Board. I will say that in conversations, I asked Julie to get me a list of all of the ancillary boards that our council serves on. The only 2 board members that do not serve on a board external to the boards we do here are Mr. Meredith and Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, of course, because he's brand new and hasn't had a chance to get more workload dumped on him.
We need to build him out a little bit more. But I'm gonna.
But I will say that Mr. Meredith did reach out to me and ask that he be considered for this particular board.
I have a real problem with that.
Well, and I think it's important that we all as
Right.
council are involved in boards where our city has impact. So the boards like the United Way and the different organizations that we all deal with. So I really appreciate this council for all the work that they do, because every one of us is serving on some board external. So with that, I'm gonna probably lean towards, even though I don't have a vote.
I'll be
Mr.
dominating,
Meredith.
William.
Not here.
Even though I did want this, but.
We can do some arm wrestling.
It has to be some wrestling.
No.
So, no, she's already given me a list of things.
They're mayor dues.
All right, and then item 9 is a consideration of renomination of Mayor Pro Tem Brandon Jones to the Council of Governments Regional Emergency Preparedness Planning Council, EPPC. And
somebody else wants it.
No.
I'm more than happy to.
We love you on it.
And our alternate is stepping off just because there's no bandwidth to be able to do that, is my understanding.
That's correct.
So, and I completely and utterly appreciate that. Is there anybody who would be interested in being the alternate for the Emergency Preparedness Planning Council?
You know, hear what I just heard? I can't wait to be alternate for that.
I was going to suggest
Yes.
Kelly.
That's a really easy one to get into, so
He set you
I
up.
love it. Thank you. So we'll renominate Brandon Jones, and we will nominate Patrick Kelly as the alternate. Item H, reports. Councilmember Troyer, would you mind if I started with you tonight?
That's fine.
Okay. That way it's not a surprise. And then we don't have any closed session. Okay, then we are done with workshop, and we will reconvene in a regular session at 7 p.m. Well, once she razzled in all of those motions and seconds,
Let's get it rolling.
it's going. Good evening. It is 7 p.m. and I'm calling this regular session of the Louisville City Council to order. We do have a quorum. First up is our invocation, and that will be led by Councilmember Green.
Please join me for a moment of quiet contemplation. Amen.
Please join me in the pledges to the American and Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
All right, item C, we do have a presentation this evening. It is the recognition of our Louisville Police Department for being reaccredited by the Texas Police Chiefs Association Foundation. We have Chief Kevin Deaver, and I will be joining you down there, and we have Chief David Coulon.
Well, greetings. My name is David Coulon. I'm the police chief for the city of the Colony, but that's not why I'm here tonight. I'm actually here as a representative of the Texas Police Chiefs Association. The Police Chiefs Association is 1,700 police department chiefs and executive professionals in the state, and we're dedicated to making Texas the best state for law enforcement. One of the most important programs that we have is the recognition program, where we accredit a police department. Now, it seems like it's not just, turning in a yearly annual fee or just joining. It actually is a quite substantial process. There's currently 170 best standard practices that have to be met, every single one of them, by the police department in order to be accredited. And accreditation doesn't last forever either. Every 4 years it expires. And the only way to get reaccredited is to completely start over, proving that your police department is meeting every single one of those standards. So once some accreditation standards have to do with just running the jail, some are about a proper use of force policy, they audit the training, they audit all your paper trails for money, and basically it touches every part of the police department, making sure that this police department is meeting the best standards in every single one of them. 16 years ago, Louisville actually became one of the first to become accredited in the program, and every 4 years they've been accredited afterwards. So once again, I'm here to present the accreditation. And the accreditation is not simply that you fill out a form. I mean, we actually send assessors from all over the state to the city of Louisville, and we spend 2 whole days inside the police department. So we're interviewing employees, riding out with police officers, we're auditing all the money and property rooms, we're making sure you're doing your inspections, and all 170 of those, you have to have proof. And it has to be the proof that the Texas Police Chiefs Association says you have to have for each of those. And so only after all that's done, the assessors leave, they write up a final report, submit it to the program committee, and there it's voted on whether a police department can meet accreditation. And I'm happy to say this year it was a unanimous vote of yes, the Louisville Police Department meets accreditation. And so what this really means to you guys is it's a reassurance to city management and to the community that you do have a police department that's meeting the best standards. The standards are adjusted every 4 years because we keep up with what's going on. We're always adding some. There's new court cases, new laws, there's new sentiment from citizens on what they think correct policing looks like, and all that's added into the program, and your police department has met all of that. And what it really means is, I mean, the basics is that the city of Louisville has one of the best police departments in Texas. There are 2,700 law enforcement agencies in Texas, and only 185 ever get accreditation. And even fewer than that ever get recertified. So you have very much to be proud of. The Texas Police Chiefs congratulates the citizens of Louisville for having this kind of police department. We congratulate you for having the leadership that would allow this to happen, and we congratulate the police department for all the hard work they do every day. So why don't we give them a round of applause? So this is just a plaque. A plaque doesn't represent all the hard work and dedication the men and women have, but I would like to present this plaque from the Texas Police Chiefs Association Foundation. It says, "To all that see this certificate, know that the Louisville Police Department, having fulfilled the necessary qualifications and mandatory requirements of the Texas Police Chiefs Association, the Law Enforcement Best Practices Accreditation Program, by voluntarily providing compliance with Texas law enforcement best practices, the Texas Police Chiefs Association Foundation Board of Directors does hereby award this certificate of accreditation effective the 16th of May, 2022 through 2026. Congratulations."
And I would like to bring up our program manager, Captain Craig Barnhart. He was the one that was responsible for providing all the proofs necessary for us to get this. He's the latest program manager that we've had. Chief Powell started it when we were first recognized.
And I want to thank the residents of Louisville because you all allow us to provide the resources that allow our police department to run like this. If you get the opportunity to ride along or to talk with our chief, you will understand how innovative and ahead of the curve our department is. We are constantly pointed out regionally as one of the best departments to work for, as one of the departments to look at for best practices and how to get things done the right way for the community. And I am just proud and tickled pink to be represented by such an amazing organization. So thank you guys. Item D, public hearing, consideration of an ordinance granting a zone change request from Agriculture Open Space District to Light Industrial District on approximately 3.251 acres, legally described as lots 1 and 2, Block A, VFW Edition, located at 997 State Highway 121 Business, as requested by Prestige Garage LLC, the property owner. The subject property, located at 997 State Highway 121 Business, is owned by the adjacent Prestige Garage LLC. The property is zoned AO and previously contained the Louisville VFW facility. A zone change will allow Prestige Garage to expand, providing space for small businesses and new entrepreneurs. Light industrial is the most appropriate zoning district for an office warehouse use. It is recommended that the City Council approve the ordinance as set forth in the caption above. We do have Mr. Richard Lutke, our Planning Director, available for questions. If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you would please vote. Motion passes 6-0 to close the public hearing. I'll entertain a motion to approve as set forth.
Move to approve the ordinance as set forth in the caption.
Do I have a second?
Second.
City Attorney?
This is an ordinance of the Lewisville City Council amending the zoning ordinance by rezoning approximately 3.251 acres legally described as Lot 1, Block A, VFW Edition, and located at 997 State Highway 121 Business from agriculture open space district zoning to light industrial district zoning, correcting the official zoning map, preserving all other portions of the zoning ordinance, determining that the public interest and general welfare demand this zoning change and amendment therein made, providing for repeal or severability, a penalty, and an effective date, and declaring an emergency.
Council, if you'd please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Item E, Visitors Citizen Forum. Speakers must address their comments to the mayor rather than to individual council members or staff. Speakers should speak clearly and state their name and address prior to beginning their remarks. Speakers will be allowed 5 minutes for testimony. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the City Council is restricted from discussing or taking action on items not listed on the agenda. Action can only be taken at a future meeting. I do have a couple of folks that did come to speak for public hearing, or I'm sorry, for public comment. Let's see here. I have a Logan, and I'm sorry, I can't, you'll have to, if you could state your name and address for the record, that'll save me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Logan Fruworth. I live over at 1201 Elmwood. I just came in today because the issue with street parking on Elmwood is pretty bad. Cars are parked on both sides. It's a one-lane road pretty much. I don't care about the street parking. It's more about the safety. Past few weeks now, I've went to pull onto the road, and I can't pull all the way off of Old Orchard because somebody's coming out. There's no room for me to go. So hopefully we can come up with a solution for that because I don't want any accidents in that area. Or, you know, maybe somebody's stuck there and, you know, firefighters can't get to where they need to go. That's all I have for today.
All right. I appreciate the heads up, and we'll have somebody from city staff reach out to you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Next up, I do have Nancy Sansom, Judy Hammer, and Willie Peterson. All here to speak up. And if you could state your name and address for the record,
Yes,
please.
good evening. T.J. Gilmore and council. Yes, my name is Nancy Sansom. I'm a resident of an independent senior community here in Lewisville. I've been here for 5 years. I'm 81 years old. We represent the Lewisville Committee for Fair, Low-Income, and Fixed-Income Seniors. And many of our residents are here tonight to help represent us over there. We are like a canary in a coal mine. This seems to have been thrust on us several months ago and when we became activated. We represent a group of tenants who are worried about the continually increasing rents that we are unable to pay. We are asking for your help so that we will not be evicted or displaced. And in the paper Friday, there's all this news from the Dallas Morning News about what's going on in our county, in our state, about rent, evictions, high prices, people have nowhere to go. Many seniors are dealing with multiple serious and chronic health conditions. Most seniors are not able to afford the HUD and the what we call Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, that's the group that's with HUD that's Texas uses as their price scales. Most seniors are unable to afford the HUD and the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs income percentage. And here's a chart. If you look in your packets on the very back, did everybody get a packet? Okay, look in the back page, and this is really a simple chart that shows what we're talking about. So when you see it here, up here, Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, you see the Louisville low income. Most of us are between 20 and 30% of yearly income. Well, just this last year or two, we were moved to, from low income, we were moved to affordable. We're not affordable. If you look down here look in the chart under 60, we need to be making $42,000 a year. And we're lucky if we make $11,000, $12,000 a year. Now there are differences, but we basically fall into the low income category. So I've explained that, and I'll go on. Most federal and private agencies are now closed due to much higher demand from seniors' needs. Many other seniors aren't able to qualify because of the mandated extremely low income caps. The HUD and THCA agency funds are also limited. If a person qualifies for HUD, then they have to wait from 3 to 7 years for a voucher. We may be dead by then. So, true. Anyway, after we get the notice after 3 to 7 years, then there's a lottery system that's activated to select the top applicants. Some other agencies have been telling us that this system is inefficient and unproductive. There's not enough housing coming from the federal government for low-income housing. There's just not. So, in conclusion, we'd just like to make some suggestions or possibly some solutions for you to consider and perhaps activate for this crisis in housing. First, and I understand this is happening right now, change Louisville's zoning requirements to allow building more multifamily and granny units on present or new properties. There are federal funds, I understand, up to $450 million that will help transverse this process. Number two, encourage legislators to increase the number of building sites for more multi-family construction and affordable rent housing properties. And also, we just like to say we definitely and enthusiastically support that the property on Edwards and Fox that's promoted by, I think, the Generations Housing Corporation. They'll be building multi-family units there on that property. We're not sure when it'll start, but they have applied for tax credits and they are just waiting that process legally. Third, legislators should contact HUD and TDHCA to change their percentage tables, because these percentage tables are just way out of sight, way beyond any low and income fixed seniors. It's just impossible.
Ms. Sansom, that is your 5 minutes. We do appreciate
So just in conclusion.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we just want to suggest if nothing happens, then we suggest considering a moratorium on the upsurging virus, the 9.1% inflation, and the lack of available housing. So in closing, growth is good, but at what cost to many desperate, financially burdened, and frail seniors? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It sounds like you have heard from staff on a couple of the things that we are working towards.
We've met with them, and we've met with the Representative Tan Parker, and we're continued meeting with Senator Nelson and the Representative Michael Barges. We have meetings upcoming with them too. We're just trying to put out the word because there's several issues here. We don't want to see our seniors put out on the sidewalk. We've already had evictions we know of already.
Well, we appreciate your advocacy, your clarity of thought on this, and some great suggestions.
Okay.
We will continue to follow up with you.
Okay.
Ms. Hammer or Mr. Peterson, do either of you wish to speak? Or, yep, then come on. Mr. Peterson, if you'd state your name and address for the record, please.
Mayor Gilmore, I'm Willie O. Peterson. Since November 2020, I have been a resident at Evergreen of Louisville for seniors, 415 South Garden Ridge Boulevard, 3201 is my apartment, Louisville. I'm obliged to appear before the council tonight, first as an advocate, and to say thank you. First, as an advocate, I speak for some vulnerable seniors living at Evergreen at Louisville, where I'm a resident. They're fearful of being displaced by the pace of escalating rents. So I implore you, respectfully, please help us to identify emergency rent subsidies for these vulnerable residents. I hope in your capacity, whatever access to local charitable resources that you have, thank you for connecting them with our at-risk Evergreen residents. Second, thank you. I say thank you for your good efforts on behalf of Louisville seniors. Recently, my colleagues and I had an opportunity to visit with the city manager, Mrs. Powell, and her staff. We had a good, lengthy conversation about the desperate situation of a growing number of Louisville seniors. You can imagine how thrilled we were to learn the city of Louisville is possibly moving forward in conjunction with developers to bring online some badly needed multifamily affordable housing. I understand this new housing is to be located somewhere in the vicinity of Edmonds. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Judy Hammer.
Good evening, Mayor Gilmer and the rest of the councilmen. I'm Judith Hammer, and I've lived about 6-7 years at Evergreen, and I live at 415 South Garden Ridge Boulevard, and my apartment is 2101, and your zip code is 75067. And I'm glad to be here in this beautiful room. It's the first time I've been here. It's gorgeous, and the acoustics are good. You know, I'm told to speak louder, because as you get older, your voices kind of disappear. But your mics seem to work pretty good. I was listening when they spoke, and I was hoping that all of you can hear me today. The handwriting is on the wall. There's not enough available housing in Dallas-Fort Worth, or probably the rest of the world, or United States if you look at the statistics. This allows rent to increase, then the low-income seniors and disabled are out of the renting market. The millennials are now renting apartments. They are waiting to buy their first homes, and when the loans and the interest rates are much lower. In the interim, low rental tenants are facing eviction. They need to take the advice of the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center. And I must say, just for a little, no, it wasn't the Dallas Morning News about 2 days ago, about 3 pages on this advocacy, this lawyer, Mark Melton. And he started out about 6-7 years ago with himself, barely a lawyer, and then 5 additional. And then as of the last 5 years with 175 attorneys and 6,000 people, he's been helping to stop eviction and support people and teach them how to sign up for at least a positive short-term pause before they may be evicted and may not be, and teaching other sources. I'm learning so much just by getting on the internet and finding out about all these things. What he wants them to do is for rental assistance and be protected. That's the big word, protected, at least at the initial part. I know during the, all our, was a year and a half of this virus, we had this moratorium on. They're supposed not to, I'd heard rumors they still were being evicted, but some of them were held off. But anyway, this assistance would protect them until the application is either accepted or denied, and then they begin to seek other sources. And that's where our job is, advocacy, is helping these people, because some of them can't hear or see, at least we have quite a few of those that I've met since I've lived there. They need to have someone on their side and helping them, or they really have a limited knowledge of politics and of procedures, and they need help. And that's where you people sitting in front of me help, and all of us that are sitting here. That was one of the main things Mr. Mellon said that he learned from his long process. He knew, he went through what he's helping these people, is that we're helping each other. That's the biggest thing that we're going to win over this. Even if it's a small thing. You open the door today, someone. I got a ride from Willie's family has been supporting us the first time I met them. Things like that, small things. Getting to know Claire, I knew her before when Donna was here, and I've been astounded at all their dedication, and that's what's important. And again, you say, well, your public doesn't know about it. You'd be surprised how fast gossip goes. When they say, well, hey, I went here, I went to the meeting and and I saw this, and maybe you can get a few more people to attend or sign up for some of these smaller committees. And that's what this gentleman was talking about. Another thing I want to thank and congratulate Mayor Gilmer and his council on the beginning of Generation Housing Partners. I also found out about Generation Housing Development, 35 or 30 years. You've picked a really good group. I dug in and learned a lot about these people. But anyway, it's on 1727 Edmonds. It's a start. And the process of rules and writing that you've been informed is going on. To me, it's a start. The main thing is zoning. That's the thing we've been working on for 2 years. That's one of the hardest things with HUD. If they do put things in, they put them in an area that probably is not the best place to put a brand new building. Or you better be tearing down all the rest of those places, because I've mentored the Chin and some of the other groups for several years before I started having to thumb a ride. And I found out how many people were living around, and those looked like World War II apartments all around there. And there's many, many families in these small rooms. And I admire the people that are helping their children learn to read, because that's your highway into learning. But anyway, I want to thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you.
We'll see where we go.
Appreciate it. Obviously, there's a large crew here, and this is very important to you. We thank you for your advocacy and for reaching out. I think as you continue to research and work, you'll find that this is a major priority, and it has been a focus of the City Council for the last couple of years. A lot of these projects are starting to come to a head this year, but we're more than happy to let you know what we're doing and get your input on those processes and how we can help. So thank you so much for taking your time today. Item F, consent agenda. All of the following items on the consent agenda are considered to be self-explanatory by the council and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so request. For a citizen to request removal of an item, a speaker card or e-comment must be filled out and submitted to the city secretary. City secretary, are there any requests for removal?
No, sir, I've not received any.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you'd please vote. Consent agenda passes 6-0. Item G, regular hearing, consideration of a resolution authorizing the adoption of the Community Development Block Grant 2022 through 2026 Consolidated Plan and the 2022 Annual Action Plan, and authorization for the city manager to submit the plans to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. A consolidated plan for housing and community development must be submitted every 3 to 5 years to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to receive Community Development Block Grant funds. The consolidated plan outlines priorities and goals for the CDBG program for the next 5 years. Additionally, an annual action plan must be submitted to receive $783,866 in CDBG funds for fiscal year 2022-2023. The plans were developed with citizen input, including surveys and public meetings. The CDBG Advisory Committee reviewed proposals submitted by nonprofit agencies. They unanimously recommended a draft budget for the action plan on May 17, 2022. The plans must be submitted to HUD by August 15, 2022. It's recommended that the City Council approve the resolution and submission of the plans as set forth in the caption, and we do have a presentation from Maureen Milligan, our National Development Council, and Chris McGinn, our Director of Neighborhood Inspection Services.
Good evening. My name is Maureen Milligan. Thank you for introducing me, Mayor. I'm here with the National Development Council. I'm a local resident, live in Dallas, just down the road. And I'm going to spend about the next 20 minutes just walking you through some of the analysis that we did to make recommendations about the goals and the budget for your consolidated plan. I know some of you have served on the CDBG Commission before and serve on the homeless leadership team with Denton County, so some of this may not be new, but maybe some of the information we present will provide you some insight. But the 5-year consolidated plan is a required element so that the city can spend the funding that it receives from HUD. And it's really a chance to assess the housing market in your area as well as your affordable housing needs and your other community development needs, and then develop a strategic plan that helps you make place-based investments. So today we're going to go through some of the data that we gathered, and then we'll review the goals that we're proposing for your 5-year consolidated plan, and then certainly welcome any questions. First off, I just wanted to go over some of the data that we used for the development of this consolidated plan. Certainly the most recent census was very helpful to the extent that data has been shared by the U.S. Census. And then a lot of the data is from the American Community Survey, which is a blend of 5 surveys that are taken over a 5-year period to give you information about your housing and your community development needs. And then certainly we've worked with staff to gather additional data that helped inform the plan. We also deployed a survey that I think many of you shared on social media and helped draw some attention to the survey. We had 4 town hall meetings. And then we spent a lot of time with stakeholders, many of your service providers that work either exclusively in Louisville or in Denton County, to really get their very pointed and insightful comments on what the needs are in the community and potential solutions. And then we've held 2 focus group meetings, including one at one of the Evergreen housing developments. So next year, you're anticipated to receive about $783,000 from HUD. HUD requires you to anticipate your 5-year budget, but HUD only releases your allocation on a yearly basis. So you'll see that although you're receiving about $783,000 next year, we've anticipated that amount may reduce every year just depending on administrations and priorities. CDBG is not always funded at the same amount every year. So it's potentially that you could have closer to, in total, 400 or a little bit over, 4 million. And if you do, you'll be able to use that funding. So let's look a little bit about population and demographics, which certainly is always fascinating to look at in the city of Louisville. So what we did was compare numbers from the 2010 census and the 2020 census. And you can see that Louisville is a growing community as well as a diverse community, and that diversity has continued to increase over the years. And so in the percentage change column, you can see where there have been changes in various races within Louisville. I'll point out in the most recent census, we've seen across the country that individuals who identify as more than one race has changed throughout the country. That could be for several factors. One is how the census asks the question, as well as truly changing demographics. but very interesting that you've seen quite a growth in people who identify in Louisville as 2 or more races. Also, if we look at ethnicity, you have also had more growth in individuals who identify as Hispanic or Latino than those who do not identify as Hispanic or Latino. Some really fascinating data about median incomes in the city and how those have changed over the past 10 years. So back in 2010, your median income was about $55,000. So that median income, if you line up everybody in the city with their household income, from no income to the highest income, that family in the middle is that median income. And so it's grown from $55,000 to almost to over $67,000 as of the most recent ACS data. And what's driving that change? So if you look at what incomes are represented in the city, you can see that over that 10-year period, the number of households that are earning $75,000 or less has dropped, whereas the number of households that are earning more than $75,000 has increased. So part of that is obviously very positive data that families earning higher incomes are attracted to Louisville and all of the amenities that it offers. It does, as we're thinking, especially with the con plan and low and moderate income families, it does potentially point to families being priced out of the city and no longer being able to rent or buy a home in the city of Louisville. And just in a little bit, we'll look at rents and home sales prices also to really dig into that data a little bit more. I wanted to highlight the new community and the new residents from the city of Castle Hills because due to the timing of this consolidated plan and what is released with the decennial census, from a quantitative standpoint, the residents of Castle Hills are not included in a lot of the tables and the quantitative data that's in the consolidated plan. But they were consulted in the community engagement, the survey, and the town halls, and we did have residents of Castle Hills who did attend those town halls. And certainly as the consolidated plan is updated in the next 5 years, both the quantitative and the qualitative data and input from the Castle Hill residents will be taken into account. But you can see also another diverse community, and if we're looking at the median incomes with slightly higher incomes than you saw in the previous slide. So the tables can only present so much. I'm a very visual person, and so if you take the time to read the about 230 pages of light reading of the consolidated plan, you'll see a lot of maps. And we use those maps because it really does help visualize not only what's occurring, but where it's occurring, where people live, what their incomes are. And so this slide here is looking at the predominant racial or ethnic group by census block group. So that's the smallest geographic area that we can pull data from. And so very interesting. So you see areas where you have the darker blue are areas where the predominant racial group is white. The oranger areas where you have more Hispanic households. And you have a number of census block groups where the predominant race or ethnicity is black. And then you can see as the shades differ where there is more concentration and less concentration of one or more race. So again, looking at thinking of those tables that we saw related to median income, here's where we see that variation in where those median incomes. So we talked about the $67,000 being the city's median income, and now we're looking at census tracts and what the median incomes are in those census tracts. And so you can see areas to the west and to the far east have higher median incomes than areas certainly in the Triangle neighborhood in central Louisville. And this next slide helps give you even more granular data about those median incomes. So if we look at it by census tracts, you can see your zip codes 2017-30, 2017-31, they're on the western side, as well as 2016-53, which is in your far east, have median incomes that are above 100,000. But some of your census tracts that are in that central area in the Triangle have a median income far, far below that of $36,000 a year. So as we start talking about housing affordability, certainly understanding some of those ranges of median incomes and where people are living that earn those incomes helps inform where to make those place-based investments. So we use Moody's Analytics when we're looking at rental properties. And so this slide is very, very helpful because it helps you understand what types of rental housing units you have in terms of the size of the units, as well as the asking prices for rents. And this was pulled in April of 2022. So you can see in the apartment rental market, I must say that this doesn't account for your single family rentals, these are just your apartments, that Louisville's housing stock is primarily 1 and 2 bedroom units. You don't have a lot of studios, you don't have a lot of 3-bedroom units or more. And your rents are really starting to align now with the city of Dallas. So you, in years past, may have been seen as a community that offered more affordability as compared to some of the bigger cities, and we're just not seeing that from a rental standpoint anymore. And in the consolidated plan itself, it does look at those rents over time, which have been increasing. You may have already seen this data before. It's from the Texas A&M Real Estate Center. And there are 2 slides that are really looking at the exponential growth in your home sales prices. So if you look at 2011, the average sales price of a home in Louisville was $142,000. And if you look at it at the end of 2021, it was $336,000. Now, some folks may say, well, you know, we've had this kind of post-pandemic housing boom and it's going to cool off and things are going to get better. But if you really look at those trends, those home sale prices have been increasing steadily since 2011. And for any of you with real estate backgrounds, you know, one of the things that will impact housing sales prices is inventory, what's on the market. And you've had very, very low inventory for a number of years. Balanced market would be somewhere between 6 to 7 months of inventory, and for the past 5 years, you've been averaging more of 1 month's inventory. One comment that we got when we talked to a number of stakeholders was that Louisville at one point was a lifestyle community, or a life cycle community, where you could rent your first apartment, you could buy your starter home, you could expand up when you have a family, and you could find a place to live when you want to potentially downsize and retire. From that starter home standpoint, we've seen exceptional change in terms of the availability of those starter homes that are available for under $200,000. So if you look at 2011 and the price ranges, almost 60% of your sales in 2011 were homes priced between $100,000 and $200,000. In 2021, it was less than 2%. So there's just not an ability for a moderate income family and certainly a lower income family to purchase a home in Louisville with the housing market right now. So let's talk a little bit about housing affordability. So we've talked a little bit already that both rents are rising as well as home sale prices are rising. In the broader consolidated plan, we also look at wages. Wages have not kept pace with the rise in rents and the rise in home sales prices. So like I said, what does that mean? If you're a lower income family, you virtually cannot buy a home in the city of Louisville, and you likely will struggle to find a place where you can even rent and not spend more than 30% of your income on your housing costs, which is the traditional measure of what is considered housing affordability. We'll look here in a couple of slides also at those cost burdens, but we see both homeowners and renters being cost burdened, but that rent burden for renter, there's a higher percentage of renters who are housing cost burden. So just to give a little more context, if we're looking at where are our homeowners and where are our renters, this is probably no surprise to you. Just knowing where your multifamily properties are, and even maybe some of your single family properties, but certainly the triangle area and areas to the southeast are where you have higher concentrations of renters. Those dark purple areas, over 90% of the people are renters. And then same thing for your homeowners. You have a lot of homeownership in your census tracts that are on the western side of Louisville, where you have 80% or greater of the households there are homeowners. So if we go back to that renter cost burden, we did a breakdown in terms of looking at, who is housing cost burdened? Because at the end of the day, any of us can be housing cost burdened, but lower income families have less of a choice when they're becoming housing cost burdened. We could choose to live in a nicer neighborhood. We might want an amenity like a pool, a bigger home. But lower income families aren't able to exercise that choice. They're looking for anything that they can find. And often what they can find is not allowing them to only spend 30% of their income on their rent. So about 25% of renters that are making $35,000 or less, that certainly can also be seniors on fixed incomes and people receiving other benefits. But about 20% of people who are renters who are housing cost burdened are making more than $35,000. Since homeowners tend to make more money than renters, we looked at that $50,000 threshold. And we have almost an even breakdown between homeowners who are making $50,000 and less and those that are making more that are housing cost burdened. So to make it simple, we looked at $50,000 for both these next two slides where we're looking at where you have cost burdened renters and cost burdened owners. So this slide shows you where you have renters who are making less than $50,000 who are housing cost burdened. And you can tell from this slide compared to basically any other slide we've seen so far where we have the deep purple, that means more than 82% of people that are living in those census tracts who are renters earning less than $50,000 are housing cost burdened. So that, yes ma'am.
So this is 2.5 years old, this data that's in here?
It's from 2016 through 2020. So yes, it's the most recent census data that we have, but it doesn't take into account these past 2 years.
And these past 2 years are the ones that have been the most critical.
Absolutely. We can get some of that when we look at the Moody's Analytics data because that can give us where rents are going from where they were in 2020. But absolutely, that's what we're hearing from service providers is an extreme concern about, especially with eviction moratoriums and all of the emergency rental assistance funding that's going away, that there is a real concern about the lowest income families and where they're going to go.
Councilmember Cade, we do have the housing study coming later this year that's going to get more granular and should pick up those 2 years as well.
I have a question as well.
Yes, sir.
So the $50,000 mark, how was that decided? The median income I thought was $67,000 in 2021. How did $50,000 become the cutoff point for determining the burden rate?
Really, for some of these maps, we just start looking at where you see some real variation to be able to give you some insight. And so rather than taking the median income of $67,000, we wanted to see where you see a majority of families that are really starting to experience those burdens. But the benefit, we use policy map. The benefit is that you can manipulate that data however you'd like to be able to see where the burdens exist. Mm-hmm. And so if we look at homeowners, you can see the reason I wanted to show you the earlier maps where homeowners are located and where renters are located is because that helps you kind of understand where we're seeing some of this difference. We have a much higher concentration of renters over on the west side, so it makes sense that you would see more individuals that may be experiencing housing cost burdens there because there are more homeowners. Sometimes I think it gets lost a little bit about housing burdens with homeowners. With homeowners, it's often not their mortgage. They've locked in a rate. They qualified for that mortgage in the first place, but it's all those other costs that are associated with homeownership, primarily property taxes. So we heard a little bit from residents about subsidized affordable housing units like the Evergreen complexes, and I just wanted to note that there are two ways to think about affordability. And so what we're looking at in this slide are truly subsidized units. So this is where you have some kind of incentive that is requiring the owner-developer to restrict certain units to certain income thresholds and restrict the rents to certain amounts. There's also what's called sometimes naturally occurring affordable housing that doesn't have any subsidy, but because of where it is, because of its condition, its age, its lack of amenities, that's where it may charge lower rents. But that's not affordable housing as we're thinking about it here. Here, these units are units that have subsidies, and they're all low-income housing tax credit units. So I wanted to point out just a couple of things with this slide. One is really to commend the city of Louisville for where you're supporting low-income housing tax credit units, because you can see here the areas that are highlighted, the census tracts are highlighted, are where you have higher than the median income. And so one, you're not concentrating low-income housing tax credit units in one specific area. And two, you're not putting them in your poorest areas of town. So that's affording these families who are low and moderate income access to more opportunities, and they're not being concentrated in an area that can then have different economic effects because of the lower incomes. You might have less grocery stores, you might have other lack of investment in the area. But I also did want to point out one thing that's worrisome from this is if you're becoming familiar with the LIHTC program, there's what's called a initial period of affordability and then an extended use period. So 15 years and then 30 years. And in general, unless the property really gets itself into financial issues, it'll be affordable for 30 years. But at 30 years, it's at risk of transitioning to market rate housing and not income restricting or rent restricting anymore. And so you have, if you look at that year 30, you have 3 LIHTC developments that are at risk of being lost into the private market, the market rate rentals. We can't talk about housing without talking about homelessness. Again, I know a number of you serve in leadership positions, so this is likely not new data. This is looking at county-wide homelessness rather than just the city of Louisville, but as we know, homeless families often, because of their housing instability, are mobile. So I think it's still very helpful to look at some of this data. I will point out that the 2021 point in time count, which is that night when everybody goes out, volunteers go out and count folks who are either sheltered homeless or unsheltered homeless. That 2021 count was a little bit different because of COVID, so it's kind of hard to compare that to other years. But I just wanted to note that if you look at persons in households with adults and children, so homeless families, that number is rising. So we had 18 total persons back in 2018. In 2020, we had 79. So that was the quantitative data. Just wanted to highlight 2 slides. We have much more data from the survey that occurred, but just wanted to show that some of the survey data is aligning with what the goals I'm going to be recommending in just a few moments. So there was support when we were looking at low-income homeowners. There was support for helping homeowners stay in their homes and repair their homes, as well as providing that short-term assistance if they get themselves into trouble with utility costs that have gotten too high or mortgage costs. Very similar on the rental side. If we're looking at the green and the blue, were people who were strongly agreeing with some of these recommendations. There was also support for rental rehab, helping landlords make repairs to their properties, as well as helping renters stay in their properties by providing that emergency assistance. So there's a whole lot more data in the actual consolidated plan, but what that gets us to is the strategic plan and what are the goals and what's the funding that we would recommend be allocated to the goals based on the community's needs in the housing market. And so these goals tend to be fairly similar year after year because CDBG has certain types of eligible activities, so you can't spend the money on just anything. It's a flexible funding source, but it still has eligibility requirements. But I wanted to point out 2 things of these first 4 goals out of the 7. One was that we are recommending that your rehab program now include rental properties, both single-family rental as well as multifamily rental properties. Again, because we're seeing that higher percentage of renters who are cost-burdened, as well as just knowing that you have a high housing stock of rental properties in the city. And then 2, you are able to have partners in your nonprofit community help deliver some of the services with your CDBG funding. We recommend splitting out 2 of the goals this year, Goal 2 and Goal 3, to ensure that Goal 2 really focuses on those housing needs. So preventing evictions, helping families with the emergency rental assistance, and preventing homelessness. But there's still support for nonprofits to be able to provide all the other types of public services that are really necessary in the community. And then with goals 5, 6, and 7, I just wanted to highlight that in the past you've also included goals that didn't include a CDBG funding source, but you would be allocating other city dollars to those programs, and we're recommending 2 of those goals this year. The feedback we received, especially on the fair housing side, was the need for regional collaboration. Families are mobile across the board, whether they're renters, less so with homeowners, but still with homeowners. And so looking at housing affordability and homelessness at a regional level is important. And we don't want to forget homeownership opportunities, but we're recommending that you're not putting CDBG funding to that, but you're partnering with banks and other providers who may have assistance for homeowners who are seeking to purchase homes in Lewisville. And then finally, the goal related to developing new rental housing is really what you've already been doing, which is going through those development changes that are going to allow for that development of missing middle housing, which can include duplexes and accessory dwelling units, approving those changes, as well as supporting high-quality, transit-oriented, low-income housing tax credit developments. And that is the end of my presentation. Happy to take any additional questions.
Mayor and Council, I did want to thank Maureen for being here. For those of you who have been through this process before 5 years ago, this is a whole other level, next level of presentation. So NDC's done a really exceptional job with synthesizing the data so that we can make informed decisions. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Council, questions?
A ton, but.
Maureen, I did have one, if you could go back 2 slides. So on goal 1, what was the conversation around funding or using city funds to rehabilitate a rental property and maintaining cost effectiveness? Because much like when we upgrade a strip mall, many folks turn around and raise the rents because they've got to raise the taxes because the property is now higher value. How does that turns into a vicious cycle? How do we get that into a virtuous circle instead?
So great question. So when you provide city incentives, you're allowed to put requirements on it. So just like you're distinguishing those LIHTC units from naturally occurring affordable housing, if you were to put money into rental properties, you could require the landlord to restrict the income that he or she would rent to, as well as the rents that would be charged, and you would have an affordability period. So depending on the investment that was made into the house, that would have to remain affordable, income restricted, rent restricted for a certain amount of time. So that's the benefit of having resources to be able to put into affordable housing, is you can then really decide what level of affordability, what length of affordability is required.
Who here in North Texas has a program set up that way?
So you have a number of your bigger cities have CDBG or home assistance that goes to rental properties. So certainly the city I'm most familiar with is the city of Dallas, and we make that available on both the rental side and the homeownership side.
Thank you. Council? All right, I think you have completely blown us away with the amount of content.
Late in the evening too, maybe what's keeping everyone from dinner. Thank you very much.
It's great data. You did make a mistake by letting Councilmember Kelly know that he could play with the data set. I
sensed another data nerd.
Yes, so we may have some additional follow-on to that. Mr. Lidke, could I ask you just one quick question on middle housing? I know we are talking about in the code revamp about granny flats or ADUs, accessory dwelling units. I'm not familiar with the code talking about middle housing in the form of duplexes and quads. Is that in there? Are we having a conversation about it?
There are expanded opportunities that have been worked into the rewrite.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the presentation. We greatly appreciate it. Council, I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution and submission of the plans as set forth.
Second. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you'd please vote. Motion is approved, 6-0. Item 7, consideration of the requested early termination of the concession agreement between the city and Pancho's Louisville Fishing Barge Incorporated, also known as Pancho's Louisville Fishing Barge, Inc., and Deborah Newton, collectively the Fishing Barge, and the related settlement agreement and release, and authorize the city manager or her designee to sign the settlement agreement and release. The current concession agreement with the fishing barge is for a term of 25 years with an expiration date of April 14th, 2025. On November 17th, 2021, an inspection of the fishing barge by the United States Army Corps of Engineers and city officials resulted in the city issuing an order to evacuate the premises based on unsafe conditions, which was unsuccessfully appealed. The fishing barge has represented to the city that it lacks the funds to make the necessary repairs to the premises and has requested an early termination of the concession agreement. As part of the termination, the fishing barge shall convey all personal property and any rights to the real property on the premises. This is necessary so that the city can remove the dilapidated structure and improvements on the premises. It's recommended that the City Council approve the requested early termination and the related settlement agreement and release as set forth in the caption above, and authorize the city manager or her designee to sign the settlement agreement and release. We do have Ms. Stacy Anaya, our Director of Parks and Recreation, here to present this topic.
All right, Mayor, council members, park fans, thank you for inviting us up to share a little bit of the story of why we're at this point where we want to end the lease and have a bill of sale for the fishing barge. So I'm going to take you a little bit through the history of the fishing barge and show you a couple pictures. This was actually a picture of a postcard that was given to me on my last visit over to the fishing barge. It kind of shows it in various stages of its history and some of its form or glory. The next set of pictures kind of shows like when it was immediately after it was constructed, and tells some of the stories about once it was opened, how it was a neat place, not only for people in Louisville, but all over the region. But the pictures also demonstrate how the land in that area and the water surrounding it has changed over time. If you'll remember, during the course of its history, the conservation pool has changed twice, and some of the requirements that the Corps has had in terms of operation and construction of the facility has changed. And just over time, while this has been a great place and there's been great experiences, the structure has kind of outlived its viability. So a little bit of the history. The structure itself, the construction began in 1958, shortly after the city of Louisville formally had a lease for the Lake Park area. That was shortly, about a year and a half after the dam was constructed. Once the construction of the fishing barge was complete, they started operation in 1959. And the original 3 members who built the barge sold out to one, Mr. Jago, and he passed that facility down to his family over time. In the 1980s, the city of Louisville updated our lease for Lake Park, and it included certain areas over in the Tower Bay area and added the Spillway Park to the lease. And at about that time, the fishing barge was sold. And then you'll remember in 2000, the current concession agreement for the barge was executed, and that was with the newest owners and most recent owners, Mr. Pancho Newton and Grady Colomb. At the same time, the city had put in place with the Corps our current lease, which started in 2000, the year 2000, and is scheduled to end in April of 2025. After that, during the course of the years, the Corps passed some rules and regulations and standard operating procedures for how vessels, docks, and marinas needed to be operated and the construction they needed that were required for them on the lake. And a couple of those things included what the flotation devices are on those structures, especially back in the 1950s, it was popular to build flotation structures out of foam. foam blocks. And as time went on and we became more knowledgeable about how that could hurt the environment, the Corps started requiring that those flotation devices, especially those foam blocks, be encased in something so as they became damaged, those little bits of foam wouldn't go out into the lake. And in 2007, they codified that, but they gave existing structures a grandfather status. So those things could remain in place unless you were doing a significant upgrade or replacing it. In 2019, the Corps said, you know what? People are no longer grandfathered. You have until 2028 to replace all existing foam flotation devices. They also talked of what breakwaters could be. You could no longer have the tires filled with foam or cement as a breakwater. You need to use a more marine grade structure out there. So those things all took place in the course of the history of the lease for the barge. Now that current concession agreement that we have with the fishing bar kind of just mirrors what our lease agreement for the Lake Park area is with the Corps. It went from April of 2000 to April of 2025, and unfortunately the original signatories of that from the fishing bar have since passed away. And there's been issues that we've had as a city with the operators throughout the term. I talked a little bit about the breakwater system not being compliant. There used to be a breakwater system out there. Whoops, hold on. Sorry. We went past that. Breakwater system out there that was built using old tires filled with foam or cement that we had to ask remove. There's been some work that's had to be done on the anchoring system and access updates that needed to happen in terms of people being able to get to the barge. We've also had some issues with some health inspections out there. You'll see that in the pictures that we showed previously that there used to be a restaurant. It used to be a really great place for people to go out and enjoy out on the lake, but over time, that just became a sore spot there and a place of disrepair, and we've had to address that officially. Now, I will say that once Mr. Newton passed away, there was some immediate improvement that Ms. Newton and her daughter made out there. The Corps even commented about how the place had started looking up. But unfortunately, by the time that had happened, there had been such an irreparable damage done to the flotation devices that were still unencased foam that the structure started sinking down into the water, especially after they removed that breakwater and the conservation pool level was raised. That shoreline's just taken a beating. If you look back at what that shoreline looks different from some of the pictures I've shown you, you'll understand what the action's been against that shoreline and the structure itself. So this being said, as we started looking at the tail end of what our concession agreement needed to be with the fishing barge, but also what the tail end of our lease was with the Corps, and knowing that we have to put a development plan in place to address what new development and upgrades will look like at not only Lake Park, but at the Eagle Point Marina areas, that we needed to address this. So on October 28th of 2021, a hand-delivered note was given to Miss Newton, letting her know that the city did not have the intent to just re-up their lease automatically, that they could be a part of a competitive bid process if they wanted to, and that they could work with whatever developer or be the developer for the fishing barge and Eagle Point Marina if they wanted to. So every year, the city of Louisville, along with Corps of Engineer team members, do an inspection throughout all of our areas that are leased from the Corps. That includes Lake Park, Eagle Point Marina, Not East Hill Park, and Leela. And we visit together and make sure that all of these areas are meeting not only state and federal and local laws and guidelines, but specifically that we're meeting those out-grant management guidelines, those standard operating procedures that I mentioned that they had put in place in 2007 and 2019. Respectively. And we go out together and city officials make immediate note of what the issues are, and the Corps of Engineers sends us a report of which we have to respond of how we're going to address any deficiencies with that standard operating procedure, those out-grant management policies. Their report typically comes 6 to 9 months after the visit. So, for instance, we had a visit in early 2021, probably March. We got that report in September of what needed to be addressed from that March 21 thing. And it just so happens that the Corps' time for inspection spans from November of one year to March of the next year. So in 2021, we were at the tail end of their early window, and then for their 2021-2022 visit, we were on the early end. So we had two in the same year, and that typically doesn't happen. On October 21st, we got notification that we were going to have an inspection done. Our joint inspection would be done on November 17th. So when I find out that that happens, immediately I notify not only our team members with the city of Louisville, but Eagle Point Marina, the golf course operators, Arcus Golf, and Sneaky Pete's and the fishing barge that will be coming out to inspect these areas. And to make sure that they're ready for these inspections, I remind them of the deficiencies that were identified in the previous inspection and saying, hey, we better make sure that we've addressed these deficiencies so that we're ready for this next inspection. So on November 17th, the city of Louisville, we had some officials, not only with the Parks and Recreation Department, but building officials and Corps officials visited the set of places out at Lake Park. And I'm going to invite Jeremy Booker up here to tell you a little bit of what we saw from a building inspection standpoint.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jeremy Booker. I'm the building official over the Building Services Department. I was part of the team that did the inspection on November 17th. And as Stacy mentioned, the structure was built in the 50s, so it's over 70 years old, and it's really surpassed its life cycle. So there's deficiencies in every building component, from mechanical, electrical, structural, accessibility, but our biggest concern was the electrical system. As part of our team, we also had two electricians with us, our chief building inspector and our senior electrical inspector, our licensed electricians, and they shared the same concerns. So the electrical system, electricity and water just don't mix. And with the building being built in the 50s, it's outdated. The electrical system's outdated, it has not been maintained. We found evidence that recent electrical work had been done without any permits, without inspections, and did not comply with current codes. It did not meet code for outdoor use. It did not meet code for a wet use, and it didn't meet code for a structure that's located on a body of water. So in the two pictures that you're looking at right now, these are taken, it's the same door in both of these pictures, just from slightly different perspectives. But if you look, that floor is completely rotted away. That kind of neon green in the dirty water, that's the lake right there. So, and then on the right-hand picture, you'll see that's our main distribution panel right there. So that's how, if there's an emergency, somebody's getting electrocuted out there, that's where the primary disconnect is for the entire electrical system. And as you can see, it's almost impossible to access that. And if you can, it's dangerous in itself. So the picture on the left, Stacy mentioned there were some issues with anchoring. Their anchoring system is now, they had a steel cable, can't see it very well in the picture, but they had a steel cable tied to that big block, which was not the approved method, and the cable is completely slack in the water. And on the bottom part of that picture, that's their gas line. It's a plastic poly pipe that's not rated for sunlight, not rated for exposure, and it's looped around. It was snaked across the water to the building. Then in the middle picture, you can see that the walkway, that's the main walkway. It's leaning. It's not stable. It's very difficult to maneuver, and it is not ADA compliant. There's just absolutely no way that somebody that was in a wheelchair or had some sort of physical impairment could manage that. And then the right-hand picture, again, a little difficult to see, but there's a corrugated pipe that comes across that water. We believe that's their main plumbing system, best we could determine. So we think there's a holding tank on the structure, and then it connects to a pump. So that's not code compliant by any means. It enters up the side of the hill, and I tried to open it up. It was covered with a piece of drywall. Now I tried to open it up, and it started to crumble apart on me, so I could not even inspect it. We also could not determine how they're sourcing the potable water to the building, so we could not find a water line entering the building. There are potential cross connections throughout the building, but between the potable water and the non-potable system. There were multiple places where there was no plumbing traps, so methane gas from that holding tank is entering the building. It was very strong in the bathroom area, but you could smell it throughout. So the methane gas is being introduced into that structure. On the left-hand picture here, that's the rotted floor structure. That was taken in their storage area, kind of back of house storage area. And in that area, we could not safely inspect that entire area, but we did see that there was hazardous material lockers in that area. So we don't know if there was still hazardous materials in those lockers or not, but the floor was so soft, we did not feel safe even walking back there. And then the middle picture again is there's two furnaces, there's two main furnaces in the closed area. The flexible gas line to both units were severely corroded, they were kinked. We're not sure if there could be leaks in there. One of the vent terminals that are above the roof line was too short, too narrow, so you couldn't get a proper draw. And so there's potential that carbon monoxide gas was going to back up into that facility when they turned those furnaces on. And then in the right-hand picture, there's construction debris. You could tell that there was recent construction going on out there. There's no permits, no inspections again. It's blocking some access, it's blocking some means of egress areas. It's just a concern. So after we sent the previous fire marshal sent the notice of evacuation, we had 3 members of our team. It was our chief building inspector, our assistant building official, and then the previous fire marshal went with representatives I believe it's Mrs. Newton's daughter on the site, and said, let them know, look, you have to have engineer plans, you have to get an engineer on site on board with this, and you need permits and you need inspections. On December 10th, I sent a substandard notice. So we shut down the facility primarily because of the electrical system and the means of egress, which is the structural deficiencies, but there's also all the other issues that I mentioned out here. So in that substandard notice, I included all those other deficiencies that need to be repaired before they could really operate fully. So I sent that on December 10th. I gave a 30-day notice. On January 7th, Ms. Newton asked for an extension, and I granted that. I knew that to get an engineer on board, to get a contractor to go out there and investigate everything was going to take time. So I extended that to February 28th. We received a couple of handwritten notices from Mrs. Newton. She had hired some master electricians to visit the site. They were handwritten notes, so they were a little difficult to read and decipher, but essentially said everything's fine out there, or it's either code compliant or it's grandfathered. And we're like, no, that was not what we stated. We said you need permits and need inspections by city officials. And so as part of that, she had asked for the electricity to be restored. And I forgot to mention that when the fire marshal did first send a notice of evacuation, we pulled the electrical meter. The fire chief contacted TNMP and asked the electrical meter to be pulled. So there's the site is not currently energized. So Ms. Newton, when she submitted those 2 letters, she asked for the electricity to be turned back on. We stated, no, you're not ready for that. You need to get permits and inspections. Once those pass, then we can turn the power back on. So she asked again for another extension. I granted it to the end of March. And then around March 28th, we reached out to her and said, look, we'd like to meet with you. Where are you on your progress? We would like to give you some options that we've discussed with our staff. And so on April 28th, the city manager, Ms. Powell, Stacy, and I met with Ms. Newton and presented her with those options.
So when we met with Ms. Newton, it was obvious that just the magnitude of what the repairs needed to be and what it would take to get that site just back to what it was prior to the concession agreement was beyond what she and her family could handle. So right now, what we've got is the structure remains closed due to structural issues, and they have no intent to repair. They can't. We went out there in June, and it looks like the majority of the fixtures and the content have been removed. You can see they've started removing some of the plumbing materials, and a lot of the lockers that Jeremy referenced were gone, and a lot of the materials and seating, old seating that was left in place is gone. And they've been just slowly and steadily removing some of the stuff. So when we went out in June, we kind of had an idea that this was happening. We'd get to the point that we'd have this release of the concession agreement, we'd have the bill of sale. So we asked a couple of demolition companies to come walk around the area with us and kind of give a rough order of magnitude and give us some idea of what it would cost. And so if y'all go ahead and approve the settlement agreement, that we release them from their concession agreement, we have the bill of sale, and we take ownership. We'll give Ms. Newton, she has a couple of items still left on there. We want to make sure she can get those off. And we'll execute it, and we'll start moving in and look at the demolition of the structure. That's about all we've got left to do. And so we'll get some asbestos testing and figure out what those requirements will be for abatement. And we'll issue a request for proposal to identify someone who can come in to remove and demo the barge out there. The rough estimate we got without the asbestos abatement was about $350,000. Now some of that is because we've got to put a skirt around it to make sure that when we're removing the structure, nothing floats out into the water. There's also, in addition to the makeshift anchoring systems back up to the shoreline, there are anchoring systems down into the ground. So we've got to make sure that we get those out as far as we can to a safe manner. There is some rumor that they are large ship anchors from 1930. Ships that had been scrapped. So I'm not quite sure if that's true, but we need to work through our way with the Corps of Engineers to approve the demolition and removal plan. But some of the reason that we wanted to tell you the story about the history of the fishing barge is to remind everybody that what's important is those memories that people have out there and those experiences that they've had with their families and their friends, and that's not what we're trying to take away, that this structure right now doesn't provide that, and that we are keen on is when we move forward with the development of Lake Park, that the fishing barge will be an element of it. And as we bring the agreement with Matthews Southwest up there, back for your approval, you'll see that we've got the fishing barge as a prime thing that needs to be included in that development plan. So we are committed to rebuilding it in some fashion and making sure that it's available to residents in the region, and because it is a tourist attraction. It is a unique place, but it needs to be kind of in the vein of what it needs to be safe, but it also needs to be memorable in a good way. So that is the end of our presentation. Do you have any questions?
Are we checking and double checking to make sure that it stays secure? I know I went out there, I was walking around, that door was open.
Yes, we've been trying to work. Technically, it's still theirs, and they're responsible for securing the area. Over the weekend, someone took out the gate that's there off of Sandy Beach Road, and when I say took out, even the concrete footer of the gate was up and removed. So we know that there have been some instances of people trying to get through the gate and ask there. So we've asked that they secure that. They had in several times, but I think people are just trying to vandalize. So Lonnie, who is our park supervisor out there, is keeping an eye on it when he can and calling police if we need to.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I will say that once it becomes our building, we will be taking a much, I mean, Lonnie will be making regular checks to make sure it's boarded up and that we have
We'll see.
limited the access as much as possible.
We'll seal it off a little bit more.
Along those same lines, as Councilwoman Cade had expressed, is there any concern? It sounds like this is a surgical process. There's asbestos in there. There's probably still foam blocks under there, I'm assuming. There's sewage that's going across the lake into a hill is what I heard. Is there any concern of any sort of, how is the relationship with the current owners? I'll put it that way.
Well, I think it's pretty good. Claire was able to convince Ms. Newton to sign the agreement and the release, and they've been working with us. Every time we've asked for access, they've granted it to us. And now we haven't been a part of the demolition that they've been doing. And you know, as Jeremy kind of laid out, there's been some back and forth. But since the decision's been made on April 20th, they've been pretty open to us.
Thank you.
Claire, do you want to?
No, I would say, you know, obviously at first when we were taking enforcement action, there was conflict there on the original side. But, you know, sitting down and talking with them about, look, this is another option. Where the city, I mean, I don't think they have the financial wherewithal to fix it or to demo it. So offering this up as an opportunity, I think that's kind of changed the tenor of the relationship. So we've had several exchanges that have been very cordial, and I think they're appreciative.
Are you worried about like toxic spills and stuff like that going into the lake from whatever the tubes are?
Sometimes when you get in a situation like this, my concern is the current owners may retaliate. I don't know these current owners, but I'm just saying you can see this kind of thing that's happened in the past in other places where I've lived. I just want to make sure that we took precautions. If we have a great relationship now, that's fantastic, but you can imagine somebody just being upset. They went out there and cutting the sewage line, just putting, you know, just doing things that they could do to destroy it in an unsafe way. And I just want to make sure that if that was a concern, we're mitigating that. If it's not a concern, that's great.
That could always happen, so I can't guarantee that's not happening. I feel comfortable with Ms. Newton and our discussions, but you know, probably famous last words. But I know they're getting their last piece of equipment tonight off the property. I just forwarded that to Stacy and to Chief Deaver for that very reason, just to make sure they were both aware of that. That should be the last that they're on.
So that leads me to my question. So if we approve this tonight, then as of this vote, the fishing barge becomes property of Louisville, or no?
I believe it's once Claire signs and executes it.
Okay, so tomorrow.
After they remove their items tomorrow.
Okay, and then how quickly can we have the whole thing demolished?
Well, as soon as we can get our asbestos test in there, find out what the abatement needs to be and get an RFP out. But we can make that pretty short. We've got a short list of companies who worked with the Corps before. But remember, the company will have to put a demolition plan together that we have to send to the Corps for approval. But the Corps is very interested in making sure that we execute that as quickly as possible.
We should get that before 8 months, right? Shouldn't take them 8 months to approve that.
The Corps.
The Corps.
Oh, well, I'm not allowed to comment on federal issues.
Good answer. Do we have any way of putting any cameras out there? Game cameras?
We might be able to work.
Alert us?
We can look at that. I think you're right. I think the concern that you have is owning a property that's substandard before we get to demolish it.
Right.
So I think we'll, after this, we'll make sure we have a meeting, especially with the police department, parks department, on coming up with some type of mitigation process on that. I mean, access, signage, I mean, limiting access, signage, but then patrol is also part of that, and cameras can be if we can leverage some of ours elsewhere in the city and relocate them temporarily.
So, and just for the record, it will be property of the city of Louisville, but it is on federal property. So I assume that there would be some substantial criminal penalties for someone who wanted to trespass or vandalize the property. Would that be a fair statement?
That would be a fair statement.
Yeah.
Ooh, Chief.
We would rely on state law for the biggest part, and then Section 6 of City Ordinance would probably be applicable as well.
Chapter 10.
Okay, so don't do it.
Any other comments or questions? Ms. Anaya, thank you so much for the deep dive. I appreciate all the work that staff has done to this point, and I think from what I've heard in the community, we want to respect the history that's there, but we want to bring that back in a way that people can enjoy it and not actually see the lake through the flooring structure. So appreciate that. Council, I'll entertain a motion to approve the requested early termination and related settlement agreement.
Move to approve the requested early termination and related settlement agreement and release as set forth in the caption, and authorize the city manager or her designee to sign the settlement agreement and release.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Council, if you'd please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Item 8, consideration of appointments to the Serve Louisville Board. A new 501c3 organization is being created to acquire, construct, and run a nonprofit center in Louisville. This new center will be called Serve Louisville, and it will provide a space where multiple nonprofits that provide health and human services directly to Louisville residents can co-locate. The Serve Louisville Board of Directors will be made up of 5 members, 2 city representatives, 1 staff member, and 1 city council member, Pat Smith, the Serve Denton CEO, and 2 community members. Terms for board appointments are 3 years. The City of Louisville has been asked to appoint its 2 city representatives. Ashley Farron, the city's Neighborhood Services Coordinator, has been the staff member most involved in this project and has expressed a willingness to serve as city staff representative. Council members have reached out, specifically Mr. William Meredith, expressing an interest in serving as the council representative. It's recommended that the City Council appoint Ashley Farron and consider the appointment of a council member to the Serve Louisville Board of Directors. I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we appoint Ashley Farron to be our city staff rep, and the appointment of council member William Meredith to serve the first term on this board.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you would please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Item 9, consideration of the renomination of Mayor Pro Tem Brandon Jones to the North Central Texas Council of Governments Regional Emergency Preparedness Planning Council, and consideration of appointing an alternate representative to the North Central Texas Council of Governments Regional Emergency Preparedness Planning Council. Mayor Pro Tem Brandon Jones was nominated by City Council on March 16, 2021, and subsequently appointed as a member of the North Central Texas Council of Governments Regional Emergency Preparedness Planning Council. His current term expires in July 2022. The EPPC is composed of elected officials from participating cities and counties. Cities are grouped into population brackets in accordance with current population estimates. The nomination form needs to be returned to the COG Executive Board no later than August 5th, 2022. Councilwoman Krista Green currently serves as the alternate representative for this committee. City Council will also need to consider an alternate representative to fill in for the representative if needed. Mayor Pro Tem Brandon Jones has expressed his desire to continue to serve due to the amount of time needed in her duties as a representative on the Denton County Transportation Authority. Councilwoman Kristen Green has indicated her desire for another council member to be considered. It's recommended that the City Council consider the renomination of Mayor Pro Tem Brandon Jones to EPPC appointment and nominate an alternate appointment as set forth in the caption above. I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve Mayor Pro Tem Brandon Jones and to also nominate Mayor Pro Tem Brandon Jones and to also nominate Councilman Patrick Kelly.
As the alternate?
As the alternate.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you'd please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Item H, reports. Reports about items of community interest regarding which no action will be taken. Councilmember Troyer, would you mind kicking us off?
There. Thank you, Mayor. I have reports from the Louisville Grand Theater activities. Performances in the past months have been numerous. unfortunately, we're through the the Sounds of Louisville has concluded with a good performance. And the only performance I have on the list right now is the acoustic jam on Friday nights. So if you want to hear music at the theater, go to the acoustic jam on Friday evenings from 6 to 9. Activities going on: the Garden Secrets class, fall vegetable gardening, presented by Keep Louisville Beautiful, will be held on August 4th. The Val Art Talk, Exploiting Shape and Value for Stronger Artworks, presented by the Visual Art League of Louisville on August 9th. Then our regular activities in the plaza: Yoga in the Plaza, presented by Blue Anjou Studios on Wednesdays. Pilates in the Plaza, presented by Pilates in the City on Thursdays. And Tai Chi in the Plaza, presented by Lowell Johnson on Saturdays. And there are 2 exhibitions going on in the theater right now. Life is a Theater, presented by the Society of Depressed Artists, My Polar Life, and Jose Angel Hernandez through August 13th. And finally, Fresh Ideas, presented by the Visual Art League of Louisville through August 13th. And that is my report.
Thank you, sir. City Attorney? City Secretary? No, sir. Mr. Lutke?
No report, Mayor.
No report, Mayor.
No report, Mayor.
Mayor, I just want to remind everyone that on August 15th through August 21st, Thrive will be closed for its annual maintenance and cleaning of all the residue of fun and adventure that has accumulated over the summer.
That's one way to put it. Thank you.
No report, Mayor.
Mayor, Council, lake level report, and just a general water system report as well. Currently, the lake level in Louisville Lake is 519.98 feet. That's about 2 feet below normal elevation, looking about 90 to 91% full. In terms of the water system, so July 26th, we took another bump from DWU, another bump for the system, but during that date, it was from DWU. So we took a bump of another 1 million gallons per day of treated water. And since that time, we have actually seen that rather than our water plant being maxed out consistently, right now we are seeing that we have seen the benefit of that extra MGD that's being put into our system. So we've been fluctuating at the water plant from about 20.5 MGD. But I just got a call before this meeting here, and they actually lowered the flow at that facility to about 17. I suspect that they will go back up again tonight just because of the high demands. And just kind of give you an idea in terms of what potential rain might look like for the system on Saturday, even though I know we didn't get rain here. Just the anticipation of rain allowed the water plant to go down to about 14 MGD, which is unheard of during this time of year. So I would just keep hoping for rain. But yeah, we're managing, and I think we're in a really, really good spot right now in terms of just the overall summer and how it has gone. So yeah.
Thank you.
No report, Mayor.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone on council was aware that you received an email today from Deanne Tompkins, our budget manager, that had the electronic version of the budget. We also have hard copy printouts for you all if that is your preference, and we'll hand those out to you on our one-on-one meetings. The other thing I wanted to remind everyone of is that the budget workshop will be Saturday at 9 o'clock in the community room. So we want to look forward to that and our discussions there. And also let the public know that our budget will be available online tomorrow so that they can start looking at it and kind of getting an idea of what we're projecting for next fiscal year.
No report.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yeah, a couple things. City is beginning to accept neighborhood enhancement program applications starting August 17th. Up to $12,500 for neighborhoods to do a variety of things: beautify entry features, street sign toppers, neighborhood emergency response team, improved neighborhood park, and various other items as well. And also, just real quick, this is more of a private plug. Lance List, I played with Lance several times before. Lance is a great musician. He'll be at, and I'm going to screw this up, I'm sure, Spherico. All right. Great pizza. Recommend the cauliflower crust, but I can't ever say the name. Saturday, August 6th, 6 to 9. Go check him out if you get an opportunity to do so.
Thank you. Councilmember Green?
I just wanted to remind folks, for people like me who have small children at home, we are gearing up to start school. And so it always, when we transition from summer into the school year again, especially because I live in a school zone, I see people that are not quite aware that school is back in session. So just wanted to remind everybody that school does start back in session next Wednesday, August 10th. So if you see the lights flashing, it's not a mistake. The kids are there, so please slow down. Thank you.
And Louisville Police will be there to help you slow down. The animal shelter is doing a Clear the Shelter event. They are reducing their $90 fees for adoption for dogs that are over 20 pounds. So get out there. Hey, I got my thing got stolen for the budget, so I had to steal somebody's. So get out there and adopt your little fur baby to keep you company and give your life a little bit more joy.
Yes, they definitely need you to be out there. Oops, I'm off. Not that I need it. I would like to say that we have a lot of insecurities going on right now in our general public, you name it, and they're insecure about it. But I just got finished buying school supplies for my to-be fifth grade granddaughter. God, I'm old. And those of you that are worried about school supplies, there are other avenues that you can go to. You can get a hold of the different social service agencies around town, different churches. CCA's already maxed out on theirs. But it's a big topic right now. And I will say, I was very cost conscious, and it cost me well over $100 and some. And that's just school supplies. That's not a backpack. It's sad, is what it is. So there are a lot of people that are having school supply, what do you want to call it? Drives. And please reach out to churches, get a hold of the school counselors and the PTAs before school starts, because there are programs out there and there are extra school supplies for granting families those supplies. So that's one less thing that we need to worry about. And that's it.
City Manager?
Nothing, Mayor.
Councilmember Meredith?
Yes, Mayor, I've got some library activities for the week. Kindergarten, Here We Come for children age 5 to 6, Friday, August 5th, 11 a.m. to noon. Ticket required at the Bennett Program Room. Adult board gaming for adults age 18 and up, Saturday, August 6th, 1 to 4 p.m. No registration required at the Crawford Meeting Room. Wildlife on the Move, The Unhuggables, for families with children of all ages, Saturday, August 6th, 2 to 3 p.m. No registration required, the Bennett Children's Wing. And also like to say, just I'm happy about serving on the Serve Louisville board. So.
Appreciate you stepping up. We do have a few small things I wanted to touch on. First of all, I wanted to thank Westside Baptist Church. I was out there on Saturday. They served up backpacks and haircuts and pictures for safety for the police department graduates, like LCCCPA. Yeah, there it is. We had all sorts of we had Summit Club from Flower Mound out there serving up hot dogs. Just great, and it impacted over 1,400 families. So really a great, speaking of organizations helping get kids back to school, it was an amazing event. I was glad to have Westside there and pulling for our families.
This Friday is First Friday here in Old Town Louisville, so if you have the opportunity on Friday evening, come on out. We've got lots of street vendors and music and food, all sorts of good stuff. And you probably have the opportunity to check out the Sparrow Collective, which is the old Huffines building right here on the northeast corner of Main and Mill. It's been refurbished. It's gorgeous inside. They are having a ribbon cutting on Thursday evening, but I presume they're going to be available on Friday as well. So that'd be a great event. And then, of course, when you're done on Friday, come on out, because that meeting of the budget retreat is open to the public. We would love to have you there to give your input, or at least kind of see how we go about the process. I really appreciate staff and the effort they put into this document. It is a tremendous amount of work to get it into a format that we can consume in a day and make decisions on. So with that, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes.
Y'all need to discuss who's doing the dessert ice cream stuff. It's usually, the new ones, like newly appointed
Patrick, it's on you.
positions. Patrick.
We have a
this request. I'm not familiar with this process.
we have a staff meeting tomorrow morning to discuss that very issue.
Okay.
We're gonna get iced milk. Is that what you're saying?
Ice cubes, ice.
Oh, look, we have, and then Shantae, Marisol.
So we'll have that conversation offline. We do not have any closed session work, and there is no additional action to be taken on tonight's agenda. With that, we will go ahead and adjourn. Have a good evening.
Try to tell me that was a treat.
It is 8:45 p.m.